Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ravinia Festival. Please note that the taking of photographs, including the use of camera phones and the use of audio or video equipment, is strictly prohibited. As a courtesy to the artist and your fellow patrons, please ensure that all mobile phones, pagers, and anything with an on-off switch have been silenced. We appreciate your consideration. Thank you for making it a great day at Ravinia.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Ravinia's Steans Music Institute. I'm very excited this afternoon to present Robert Levin, who is on our piano faculty this week at the Music Institute. I also want to make sure to call attention to the fact that we will still be busy despite the 4th of July holiday. We have a concert after all the fireworks Friday, July 5th. And coming up on Monday, we will be doing starting our evening series with the Mendelssohn Octet, so kicking off our evening 6 p.m. concerts with a bang. At this point, I would love to ask you once again to silence any cell phones, pagers, beepers, etc. And it is my honor to introduce Bob Levin, pianist for our RSMI faculty, to conduct our masterclass this afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you. What these sessions are about are to trace in a tangible and meaningful way the connection between attitudes about performance and notions of character, and to transform those and the playing of the people with whom we work into something of deepening value. And so let's get started. I believe Mendelssohn's C minor trio is first. Let's welcome the trio, ladies and gentlemen. Super. You might wonder, well, what else is there to say? I mean, pat them on the back and send them home and say, you know, they'll be great. See you in Carnegie Hall next season. The thing that strikes me the most is that you capture very, very well the brilliance of Mendelssohn's writing for these instruments. He's one of the most naturally gifted composers in the history of civilization. I mean, he wrote masterpieces when he was a pre-teenager. So the kinesthesia, the energy, the flames that are shooting out from the stage are terrific. But I wonder whether at certain times you could play a bit more expansively, breathe a little bit more, and inflect a little bit more. That's my agenda, and hope that will be of some help to you. Now, one of the important things in performance is to look at the music that you play and see where what you see on the page might imply a change of inflection or a change of character. And at the beginning of the piece, Peter, when you play this passionate melody, I feel an 8-bar phrase from what you do, which makes perfect sense. Can we hear this, just the first 8 bars? Or actually, let's go all the way to the C minor cadence. So yeah, the first 8 bars is fine. Yeah, this is typical. He learned it from Haydn and Mozart and Beethoven. You ask a question and then you give the answer. The question that I have, though, is whether, in fact, there isn't a slight change of character after the first 2 bars. You see, it works perfectly well. Because then you got the wind at your back and it drives. And that's very effective in terms of energy. But to me, if you look at the left hand of the piano for the first 2 bars has the bass line slurred. And then suddenly, bum, bum, beam, bum. The left hand becomes breathless. And it seems to me that suggests that Peter, you could respond to that and play perhaps with a more intimate sound in the second 2 bars from the one that you do at the beginning. Can we try that? Yeah, so, and then in the phrase that follows, the embroidery, Chaeyoung, in your part, can also be made more personal. You know, don't be ashamed of taking time. You know, Mendelssohn is basically a composer who is sentimental, but not in a cloying sense, but in a warm-hearted sense. And it's very important for us to communicate that fact through the flexibility of what we do. One more time. I really do think, Peter, that you can contrast even more the second pair of bars from the first 2. You know? Good. Peter, I'm concentrating my remarks to you because you have such interesting music to play. That E natural at which we just arrived changes the destiny of the piece, so I think you can color it in a different way. It's wonderful the way the main tune of the piece is passed back and forth, and one should feel a transformation when it goes from the cello to the violin and backwards, because you make it your personal property because at that moment it's up to you to do it. So, you know, to have Brandon come in second rather than first which would have been maybe more what you would expect, the violin first and the cello second, means that when the violin comes in, you don't have to necessarily inflect it the same way that your partner did. You know, it's something to think about a little bit. And you know, this portato needs to be sustained with good articulation. Paw, 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 paw. You know, it's not pop, 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 beep, pop, pop, pum. It's people sometimes tell you it's just a bowing. That's when you have dot, 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 and there's a slur over it. One of them tells you how to begin the note. The other one tells you how to sustain the note or not to sustain it. Some people think that the dot means that it's short. No, no. The dot is how you begin the note, and the slur tells you to sustain it. Dee, da, 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 da. So something to think about as we move onwards. I don't have bar numbers, but you do, thank heavens. How about, Brandon, your entry in the middle of 18? Yeah, okay. Now, the energy that's going to take off just where we stopped perhaps should not necessarily be undermined by playing the forte, the bar before, too energetically. You know? I mean, living in a world that says loud and soft, that says high and low, that says short and long, it doesn't sound very promising, does it? If those are all the differences that you can make, music might not be very interesting. But you know something? Your tongue only knows 4 things: sweet, sour, salty, bitter. Everything that you eat is a combination of those 2 things. So up bow and down bow, high and low, long, short. If it says forte, that can mean a sad and resigned forte, or it can mean an exuberant, lively one. And in this particular case, Chaeyoung, can I sit down just for a second? You see, when you're coming along here, it hurts. And there's something a bit bitter about that and resigned about it, but then of course you're going to take off and the wind comes up and oh boy, a storm is brewing, just the way it was about 20 hours ago right here. So don't be afraid to make these nuances. By the way, SF, the accent, sometimes Mendelssohn does what Mozart does, and the SF is valid until it is contradicted by a piano. So you'll see that once in a while here, and if so, don't be afraid to stay in the string as long as it's not contradicted by the piano. All right, can we do the same thing as before, the middle of 18? Excuse me. Good. Now, Chaeyoung, you're playing very, very well. A little piece of advice about balance. If you're playing the piano in a chamber music piece, you can be sure that the balance will be satisfactory if your oral impression of your colleagues is that they are a dynamic to a dynamic and a half louder than you. Why do you suppose that is? Why isn't it enough if it sounds exactly the same? If the idea is to make everything equally heard, then that should suffice. There's a reason why that doesn't work, and what is the reason? Yes, thank you very much, the music stand. The Chinese wall of the music stand is shielding the pianist from a lot of the noise that's coming out of this black Leviathan. And in order to guarantee that the balance is not obscured, we have to back up. So there's a lot of energy, what I call mezzo fortissimo, you know? There's a lot of energy coming out of the piano, bum, 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 bum. But if we have any hope of hearing Brandon and Peter as main actors in what happens there, and especially when Peter comes in on his E flats, beep, beep, bum, 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 we need a little bit of empathy from Chaeyoung at the piano. So can we have the upbeat to this passage? It's 22, or no, 32. Yeah. Yeah, okay. See, and this is a typical example, Brandon, where in mid-sentence, Mendelssohn suddenly changes his character. He goes, ba, ba, da, 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 beam, you are, da, 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 dim, ba, da, dee, da, da. He turns the corner, and suddenly it's so dolce that we're weak in the knees out there in the audience. So, be, da, 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 just goes on and says, okay, well, why not? Let's have a tune. No, no, no. Change the sound in the middle of the sustain. Can we go from the upbeat to whatever that is, 37, is it? Yeah, looks like the upbeat to 37. Yeah, you see, and in fact, what happens here, and you do it very, very well, is you change in the middle of the phrase your tone, which then brings us back to the beginning of the piece and is a justification for doing the same thing there. You see, looking for moments where the piece goes around corners. Yeah, right at the second subject. Yeah. See, and savoring the fact that the violin becomes expressive by moving downwards, and the cello's answer is to become expressive by going higher. See, any other composer, they go back and forth. Yeah, we agree. You want a coffee? I'll have a coffee too. Right, or 2 coffees. But the imagination of this guy, you know, people like Mendelssohn, if they wanted to write the best music that was being written, they could write music that was 1/10 as good. And it would already be the best. But these people were driven by a manic desire to just cause every other composer alive, except for Robert Schumann maybe, to want to just put a bullet through their brain. So the feast on the fact that you have different ways of curvature. Yeah? Okay, last time, same thing. The point of this is that you have this rapturous second theme, and suddenly it takes a turn and things don't go so well. How many people in the audience at that point say, oh my God, we're back where we started from. We started in C minor, and here we are. I mean, this is a disaster. We thought we sailed into a safe harbor, and suddenly we're back there. And so Chaeyoung says, no, dee-da-dee-dee. No, come on, you know, let's celebrate, let's be happy. And so to feel the sense of retreat, and the sorrow in that, and then the surge of energy from the piano, which takes us back to the place that we long to be. Yeah? Si, la, si, do, so, fa, re, do, mi, re, do, do. Where is that? That's 57. Upbeat. Yeah, okay. So understand where you need to soar. I mean, that's where life is really good. You know, just be careful not to sail past those places because they're the things that are the most memorable. You know, here's another way. You know, you can define genius by all kinds of inspiration, but there are also small little things. Where, Brandon, you come in on that high B flat is uncanny because you actually come in two bars too soon. Any other composer would have had you come in 2 bars later. But you just float into the room just like that, and suddenly someone says, hey, the violin. The violin's playing that beautiful note. Wow. Huh? All right. How about that bar? A bar before Peter. You'll see where it is, and 2 bars before Brandon. You know, Chaeyoung, you're not having fun with your left hand. Oh. Yeah, but you see, the little bit of joy, a little bit of spring in this step, a little dancing, hey? Yeah, you see, and when Brandon and Peter play this, Chaeyoung, they give it some profile, and I hear you going, I don't do. You're not smiling. You know, we musicians, we can smile with the sound, and when we smile with the sound, everybody in the audience goes, oh. And if you don't, people think about what they're going to have for dinner. This is something which is, it's not about your performance, it's about the way the piece is made. It's absolutely uncanny. The hubris of this moment in which everything is going so well, and so he dares cite the main tune of the piece. But the main tune of the piece is passionate disaster. How dare he dare the gods to come down and seal our fate? But nothing can stop you now. And suddenly, oh my God. Oh my God, oh my God, oh God, the ship's gone down. You know? So the fact that you play this so many times needs to travel in terms of direction. Never being merely polite or symmetrical, but constantly pushing the piece in its fateful direction. Can we go from this bar, which, well, I can't read these bars and numbers. 98, good, somebody can. Yeah. Yes, and you know, everyone in the group plays the whole piece. You don't play your part, you play everything. And you listen. When someone else has a more important role to play, in this case it's Peter, then if he bends the phrase a little bit, if he stretches a little bit, you have to follow the sound, follow the trajectory of the bow, feel where that moment is going to expand or contract, and be there with him. And not react to it only after you realize, oh, we're not exactly together. No? Can we go from Brandon's tune? By the way, you know, just the proof that composers don't always copy. They sometimes compose by memory. The first time that we play this tune, the bass line of the piano has 4 notes that are slurred together, that are smooth and legato, and then it has a quarter and a quarter S. Ba, oh, oh. But the second time when it comes back, he writes 8th notes. Ba, ba, ba. So the notes are shorter. Probably not because he was seeking variety, but because he was composing by memory and he forgot how long the notes were. But for us, these kinds of inconsistencies are welcome because they allow us a constant recharacterization and renewal of the expression. Unfortunately, many of the musicologists who make these additions feel that absolute symmetry and regularity and consistency is better than creativity. It doesn't help our profession one little bit. Okay, let's just go on. Can we go from whatever this bar is, the upbeat to that? 114. Yeah, in the middle of the bar. Yeah, so Brendan, what's going on here, it's as if you can't remember the tune, and it's on the tip of your tongue, but and by the time you figure it out, the camera is panning away, and you disappear into the far reaches, and suddenly, from off stage, comes the voice of the Lord, the hymn. Nobody in a piece which is so secular as this, so romantic, desperate, and passionate, could think that a moment of religion would steal into the door. But that's exactly what happens here. And I think that the majesty of that melody does not require that you suddenly play much slower. Nor, I think, do you necessarily have to wait, Chaeyoung, before you come in and play the first note of it, because the whole way the cinematic retreat of the violin and the entry of the piano take place is not helped by suddenly da-da-da-da-da-da, ba-ba-ba. It's like, someone cue the pianist. Forgot to come in. Yeah? Yeah, yeah. Now, okay, now we know where it is. Yeah, you see, and the necessity, I'm going to have to stop in a minute, but the necessity here of keeping the tempo is that if you don't do it, the comments that come from the strings with the original theme become sluggish and sleepy, which is really not at all what's happening. So you get the sense of recollection. Well, music does extraordinary things in the way it can evoke people's memory. You see? So, we know the listeners hearing the piece for the first time. Now, wait a minute, I know what that is. You see? So, there has the basic character of that tune for the two of you must be preserved at all costs, and let the piano inhabit a separate world, a dream world, which will, in the fullness of things, at the end of the piece, lead to an overwhelming radiant triumph. And this, I think we may not have arrived at the moment of radiant triumph yet, but I have to thank you all very, very much. This is an extraordinary performance. It is so imbued with intensity and with power that it makes me really feel wonderful when I contemplate the future of music in our civilization, that there are young artists like you who give everything that they've got. No, this is not a joking matter. The future of classical music is challenged, shall we say. And I go around the country and give a talk called "Who Cares If Classical Music Dies?" And I gave this talk at Harvard University in front of the graduate students. And one of the graduate students said to me after hearing the lecture, he said, "So basically what you're saying is that in terms of our culture and our civilization, that classical music is the canary in the coal mine." And I said, "Oh, that's very good. I'm going to keep that one." So we know, I think those of us who care as passionately about this music as you do, that we cannot merely entertain our fellow human beings. We have to hold up a mirror to them and have them behold who they are or who they might be. And I'm fond of saying that our duty is above all to keep people up at night. That a performance as searing as the one that you gave, somewhere around 5 minutes to 3 in the middle of the night, somebody who went to that performance wakes up tormented and shattered by a message that won't go away. Now, doesn't mean we don't do a little work together, you know. But you know, my teacher, Nadia Boulanger, used to say that to experience a piece of music or to perform a piece of music isn't like looking out the window of the train as you go past the village, but it is a rope that you must continue to pull and absolutely generate the momentum that takes it ineluctably in a direction which is its fate. And the sense of travel, of creating sounds which are always moving forward, that there is more of a sense of merciless motion ahead than there is of stasis, of just because although we may, as listeners, be fascinated by such a thing, after a while it becomes a little bit too much to understand and people start to turn off. So the gestural character is very, very important here, and to distinguish between sounds and groups of notes which seem to be traveling and others which are allowed to hold back a little bit. I mean, this is a piece whose primary message is one of infinite sorrow and indeed of anguish. And of course, at the moment that it ends, that's not a moment of ending at all, because the second movement continues without interruption and moves us in quite a different direction. But let's start to work together and see if we can create just a little bit more curvature. You know? Not by making of the music something that it is not, but by breathing deeply and seeing from the note with which you begin a trajectory, a sense of exploration, a sense of maybe a little bit of danger, of vulnerability, but above all of a heart deep, deep with experience, which speaks here to us in an unforgettable way. So you see, what happens here is that Kyumin starts the the motion and is imitated by Rani, yeah? But it's not like a piece by Bach where the first instrument is imitated exactly. You start to go your separate ways and define something very personal about this state of mind. So the way the second violin, Rani, comes up from the E flat to the B flat and the second bar already hints at a desire for independence from what the first violin is doing. And then you start to move in opposite directions, and then surprisingly enough, you have that leap from the A flat to the E flat in the third bar of the piece, which suddenly challenges entirely what the first violin is doing and forces him to do something which is the opposite. He goes down the fifth, you're having gone up the fifth. I'm sorry, this is a little technical. But, you know, very often in a melodic context like this, it's the larger separations, the bigger leaps, which are capable of more expression than the smoother stepwise motion. And we exploit that in our performance. So what happens is you go from a series of gestures which are expressive. He says molto espressivo, but even if he hadn't, it would be evident. And by the time you get to the second line of this score, there is a process of disorientation, of fading, of becoming a little bit lost. And you have to wait for the breeze to come up, for the wind to come up into your sails to blow you onward, which it will do by the time you get to the third bar of that second line. But we need to feel this sense of use it, because these are things, this is an abstract language for most of the audience here. But everything that Bartok says teems with human experience. And you are giving them the equivalence in an abstract language of things which Beethoven does in his late quartets. So we don't need to go all the way back to the beginning. Why don't we just go maybe from the fourth bar of the piece? Yes, and by the way, that's possible what you're doing, which is to take a very big breath at the 16th rest. But the question is, how much do you see around the corner? And it seems to me you get to that point, it's the first rest in the piece, and you spy something, or suddenly there's some kind of sudden rush of emotion inside you, and you reach for something. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, hang on tight, folks. You know, and you reach the apogee of that moment of sadness and come down the other way, and that, of course, makes it possible for Leland to start his version of what you did before. So can we do the same thing again, the fourth bar? Yes, and you know, it wouldn't be inexcusable if when you get to the 2/4 bar, you stretched a little bit so that you could lean into the string a little bit more and again pull at our heartstrings even more explicitly than you're doing right now. You can, I think, just play the 6th bar of the piece, 2/1. Yes, and you know, he doesn't say this. You're playing with very, very good balance, because now you're going to have the cello come in, and then Haesue will come in on the viola, and that'll be just fine. The balance is all right, but I'd like to feel in the 2 violins that once the cello and the viola come in, that you are humming to yourself, the way a peasant woman in the field with the scythe finds herself humming an old folk tune that she doesn't even remember having learned when she was a child. You know, just let the sound float a little bit, but be a little bit more introverted, rather than simply playing a little quieter. It's acoustically just fine, but doesn't have a character. Yeah? The 2/4 is fine. Yeah, it's very, very effective, you know? The absolutely relentless sense of the destiny of the piece defining itself through what you do is super. There, Kyumin, when you get to the 2 bars before 3, and suddenly we hear something really shocking, an A major chord. Oh my heavens, we're actually going to hear something, you know, like that. But, you know, when you go, you know, it's like slashing the canvas, and the audience goes, oh no. So quickly given and so mercilessly taken away, you know. Be a shrinking violet, you know. We want to feel the sound become deathly pale for a minute, and everybody just feels their heart skipping a beat and says, what now? Oh my. Can we just get into this 3/3? Yeah, you see, and that extraordinary sinking, desperate feeling in the first violin is then mimicked by Haesue and then by Leland immediately afterwards, the G sharp to the G natural, the E to the E flat. And then comes this expressionistic, extraordinarily sensual sound at the beginning of the bar before 3, where suddenly we have, you know, and we're suddenly transformed into a world that we all know, and which seems to confirm that it's a world that will never come back. After World War I, things would never be the same. And so one feels every one of these things deeply. They're big twinges. All right, how about 2/4-3? Good. Leland, no hurry to jump across the strings and go down to the C string. No hurry at all. It should be absolutely dizzying, like watching someone jump off a building. You know? Tee-da-dum, and everyone says, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. You know, there's room for that. I mean, the only thing that has to happen is that Haesue just has to give you enough time, which I'm sure she's perfectly capable of doing. Now, at 3, where your piano dolce, no later than here, I think you need to start experimenting with the vocabulary of bow strokes and with sonorities that allow a little bit more air. Because there's only so far that relentless in-the-string sound can take you without essentially driving the audience farther than they're willing to be driven. But when you have these little syncopated figures that you have in the 3 upper strings at rehearsal 3, I think it's a place maybe to play with a little bit more transparency, a little bit lighter bow pressure, to keep the sense of gesture going, but to act as a kind of a middle moment between what has happened before, which is tremendously intense, and what is going to reach that point through the cello solo when we get to a bar before 4. Can we try that? How about 2/3? So, what's really difficult about this moment is that when you play fortissimo possibile, which you do at the fortissimo, and then comes the SF, you've got no place to go. All right? So keep the fortissimo searing, but leave yourself enough room to then take the breath as he prescribes, and at the last note before the 5/4, that it absolutely surpasses what you've done up to that time. Now, what did you think about that? You know, I thought that area around 3 had a good shape. You know, I'm all appearances to the contrary. I don't like to tell people what to do. I like to open doors and windows. You know, I like to say, think about this, so and so. Go into the rehearsal room. Now you have a few alternatives. See what this might bring. If you discard it, I'm not offended. If you discard everything I say, then I think that, well, either I'm giving you very bad advice, or you need to study with somebody else. But in any case, let's go from the upbeat to 4. See, and again, there, where the A sharp and Jesus part is traded then, Kyumin, for your A natural. The sense of the oscillation, of the swirling from moments of hope to moments. I mean, I think he uses these major chords for the power of their nostalgia. They evoke a world which got shattered. When you think of the millions of people, that were massacred in the Battle of the Somme, it's absolutely terrifying. And every age has the music which fits it. So there is all of that. Can we go from 5? Yeah. I think, there's fervor on the first quarter, and there's such endless disappointment in the second one. Yeah, and I think all of these skips, starting right here, Kyumin, can be vocalized a little bit more. Give us a sense that it takes energy and courage to aim at an interval like that. When you get to the second bar of 6 and it goes backwards from fortissimo to forte, you don't want to lose the intensity. You might just want to experiment with a slightly faster vibrato, see if that serves better. Can we go from 6? Yeah, and I don't think there should be any rush in those leaps, Ronnie, from you and from Kyumin. Let it be. I mean, the metronomic values here are, I think, misplaced. Can we go 3 after 6? Good, good. We're going to run out of time in just a moment, which is always my fear and always this dreadful reality. You know, Haesue, I think what's going on here is someone who is sobbing openly. You know, we go from sorrow and anguish to somebody who's really having a kind of a breakdown. I understand last week the Harbison Piano Quintet was played here. And the last movement of that, which was an elegy on the death of John's sister Helen, who was a very close friend and with whom I played a number of cello and piano recitals, is another one of those places where you see this kind of thing. Yet another is the Ligeti Horn Trio, the last movement, which is probably the most harrowing of all of the breakdowns I've ever seen depicted in musical terms. But you know, in a way, what the viola is doing, and then joined by the second violin, Ronnie, by you, is actually a combination of a kind of an improvised feeling to it, and yet on the other hand, this horribly wrenching sense of watching someone come unstuck. And that's not the place I would have liked to end this session, but I'm afraid that this is as far as we can go. Bravi, bravi, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Super. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you, Tom. Forgive me, but I'm going to start by picking some bones with some additions. So where did you get the Vorschlag that's not in the Bärenreiter? You really think he wanted that? I know there are a lot of Germans who think he did. But he didn't write it. You know? He didn't write it because, well, which one is it? You want an A natural or you want an A flat, you know? You want some scotch or you want some bourbon? I don't approve of that. It's not in the manuscript. There's a facsimile that you can buy now of that manuscript. It says, oh, Schubert forgot it. How do they know he forgot it? There's a note in this edition concerning the tune that Gabriel first plays, which says, if you look at bar 490 of the finale, that shows you that this tune should always be played with an upper auxiliary on the trill. Oh, really? So it happens 3 times in the slow movement, and it happens 3 times in the last movement, and one of those 6 times it's got that extra note there, and that means you should do it everywhere. I suggest that it tells you that you do it there, because it's the exception. You know? Ralph Waldo Emerson said, foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds. I think it applies pretty well to some of these musicologists. And I'm a musicologist, so, you know. A friend of mine once said, he said, you know, the difference between a musician and a musicologist is like the difference between a lover and a gynecologist. Well, you know, let's not go overboard, shall we? But there are some things that I do need to say about the notation and about the addition. And some things even about your performance, which I think may be a little bit more helpful than my getting annoyed at some of these things. I mean, first of all, you played the trill on the main note, and you should. That's exactly right. Second of all, Schubert distinguishes in his notation between decrescendo, getting softer, rallentando, getting slower, and diminuendo, getting softer and slower. And frequently, he follows diminuendo with a tempo. You have not made that distinction, and in fact, you have slowed down where it says decrescendo. And so I would urge you, given his consistency of notation, to do the decrescendi as a dynamic but not as a tempo thing. But now, when you see the diminuendi, which you will see here and there, they're rather important. So that's one thing. Now, there is a really quite striking inconsistency in the stroke with which Tom plays at the beginning of the movement and the one that you use. Yours is considerably longer. He's playing bom, 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 ba, da, dum, and you're playing da, 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 dim. And you know, it's not that I prefer one to the other. I can't reconcile the stroke of the length that you're playing with dots on eighth notes. Staccato dots or staccato dots. Now, when I first prepared this piece for performance, I had the extraordinary privilege of working with Rudolf Kolisch, who was one of the great chamber musicians of the 20th century. He led a quartet which played everything by memory, including Schoenberg and Bartok and things like that. And Kolisch said to me that he felt that this movement was an elegy on the death of Beethoven. We know that Schubert was shattered by Beethoven's death. We know that he was one of the pallbearers at Beethoven's funeral, carrying the casket. We know that. Beethoven died in March of 1827, and this piece was written in November of 1827. So when you think about it, 8 months, it's close to the gestation of a human being. You know, it has to percolate in your mind for a while before you can find the appropriate form. In any case, whether it's about Beethoven's death or not, it is definitely an elegy, because the rhetoric of an elegy balances grieving with consolation. And Anna's melody is beyond any question a consolation. So think about it in that way as an elegy and decide whether the possibility of its being connected with Beethoven appeals to you and makes you play with a bit more fervor than you might otherwise do. All right? Everything else that I have to say will come up in the context of what we're doing here. But I do have to say one thing. I don't think there has ever been a composer who peered into the abyss and came back to the degree that Franz Schubert did. You know, when God made Franz Schubert, from a genetic point of view, he didn't do him any favors. He was a bit pudgy, you know, a little stout, perspired a lot, had glasses like Coke bottles. You know, not actually what any of us would like. But what the good Lord gave Franz Schubert in terms of human vision is breathtaking. And those of you who know this piece, the G major string quartet, the two cello quintet, Winterreise, these sear the soul as no music I know. And in this piece, in the middle, when you find yourself, if I may, when you find yourself going from here to here, the world comes unstuck. It's pure terror. And I think anything else would be misplaced. There is no civilizing mission in this piece. And the last movement is a programmed nightmare. It's a play within a play in which the whole development of the piece takes us like through the looking glass into some horrific vision. And then you come out of it the same way you came into it. But that's a subject perhaps for another time. In the meantime, there also needs to be, oh yes, I shouldn't forget this, there needs to be more lift in the gesture of not one-dimensional. Okay, we start again. And by the way, it says Andante con moto. I'd like a little moto. So Tom, forgive me for being so picky, but you are in the dotted 16th and 32nd rhythm, slurring the accented dotted 16th to the 32nd. I wish you wouldn't. Not because I care to tell you how it should go, but Schubert didn't write that slur. Beam, 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 dee, da, dum, dee, da, dum. That's being too nice to us. Yes, and I would, you know, Gabriel, I think you can be a little bit more flexible in your declamation. Just a hint of rubato. That grace note we just passed. Sorry. It needs to come out of a deeper place in your heart. Yeah? Yes, but there's a diminuendo, so you got to slow down. I see, not because I say so, you know. I don't know anything. All I know is what I saw, what I heard, and what I read. So, no ideas from me. But he says dim, so I think we need to do it. You know, I think it's worth giving it a try. By the way, this tune is a Swedish folk song. Just thought you might like to know. How about bar 11? Little shorter. Good. So, Tom, I think you can vocalize this a little bit more. You know? First of all, being a little bit more flexible with the grace notes, and to float the high E flat. Things which are flat are not interesting. Curvature is interesting. Can we go from the entrance of the strings at 21? You know, I mean, think about it this way. It's a cold day. You're walking down the cobblestone streets of Vienna behind the bier, behind the two black horses and the carriage which is carrying the coffin. It's cold, and you're trembling, and you've just lost a great, great man who defined your life for the entire time that you were active as a musician. And it hurts. So it's not the place to make a nice sound. Boom, boom, boom. You know, what is it? That's what it is. What else could it be? No? Yes, and by the way, don't separate the termination of the trill from the trill. It doesn't need to be measured. It just sounds a little bit labored, you know? Okay, we can go on. 25. No, sorry, 26. Wait, 23, 4, 5, 26. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah, and you could even do more diminuendo. There it can sag a little bit, because as it gets a little bit slower, the stroke can lengthen itself just at boom, boom, boom. You feel tired, you know. It's a long way to the cemetery. How about 31? Yeah, and the quarter note heavier. More lift on the dotted accent and a heavier stroke. Beam, boom. You know, all the way from the belly, from the gut. Yeah, upbeat to 35. Yeah, but don't you have a crescendo in the subito piano? I hope. Huh? Don't you have a subito piano in 40 after a crescendo a bar and a half earlier? Didn't hear it. Might be fun to try. Well, a little bit more crescendo and then drop back to the piano, because then you have a pianissimo that comes afterwards. Upbeat to 35 again, please. Yeah, it's not louder, it's heavier. Beam. Boom. Thank you. Keep the tempo. Crescendo. Yeah, you see, and Tom, when you get to this point, you begin to realize how awkward it is to play this movement in that tempo. because the bo do do di do do do. You know, one of them is going to be a little bit too loud. The next one's going to be a little bit too fast. The next one will be a little slow. And because it doesn't have enough flow to keep itself up. There's not a lot of difference between what you're doing and what I think is a natural flow. But right now, it's just a little stuck in traffic. Yeah? Can we start right there at the pianissimo at 41 with just, and then of course you'll take it back to the beginning of the piece, and that's your tempo. You know, a friend of mine once said, you can struggle as much as you want, but the piece is going to end up getting played in the tempo it wants. He mentioned as an example the great George Szell's recording of the Schubert Unfinished Symphony, in which he starts the second movement at a somewhat glacial pace, but by the time you're about 50 bars in, it's doing what it has to do. And that was even, he wasn't an easy guy, you know, by any means. Great, great musician. All right, so 41. Yeah, and you see, all of a sudden the music goes to another dimension. You know, you're in E flat major and everything is so consoling and wonderful, and suddenly you play a B natural on a, and the audience goes, ooh, oh my, you know. So my teacher also said to me, when you see crescendo, play softer. When you see a diminuendo, play louder to prevent your peripheral vision from causing you to betray what the music is doing and get too loud, too soft, too soon. Okay? So how about 45? Good. So, two things here. One of them is that Kolisch said to me that what he felt Schubert meant by appassionato was hairpins up and down. And there may be something to be said in favor of that, but it has to be rather quiet. And here's where Arnold Feil, the editor of this edition, did something which approaches criminality. When you get to bar 65, he's written crescendo. Right? It's not in Schubert's manuscript. And it's not in the publication. It's not in the old Breitkopf edition either, and I don't think it's in Henley. Why? Because the second time this music is played, there's a crescendo. But the first time, if I may, he's in E flat major, and he goes, and then the second time, the piece becomes unstuck and it goes to another key. And this musicologist doesn't know the difference between music which stays in the place that it is and a piece that does that. I mean, this is really terrible. Because people buy the edition and they see it and they play it. Now, it's true, if you know how to read the edition, when it's in italics, it's the editor. And when it's in Roman type, it's original. But they don't print that distinction, I think, in the parts, because they think that string players are idiots. Thank you very much. Only the pianists know about this stuff. I'd be insulted if I were you. All right? How about we start at the appassionato? Diminuendo, poco a poco. Shh. Yeah. I mean, I think we can see how much more effective that is when it fades to a whisper and then suddenly this triumphal E-flat major comes out. Now, once again, as before, boom, boom. So, Tom, your left hand needs more lift. Boom, beam, boom, boom. Yeah? Right at the fortissimo? Yeah, don't be nice at the end. It's savage. And the audience goes, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. You know? Da 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 da. No, da pa 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 pa. You know? I didn't write this piece, but I'm pretty sure that that's what he meant, okay? Your right hand of repeated chords, Tom, is probably too much for the strings. All right? Let's skip if we can, because I know we're going to run out of time very, very quickly here. Can we go from the pickup to 98? Whoa, what about the dots? Don't be Mr. Nice Guy. Ya pop pop beep pop beep pop. I mean, I'm sorry, it's not nice music. It's an F sharp minor, you know? This is terrifying stuff. Can we do 114, please? So Tom, when you come in with a B minor chord in fortissimo, you're screeching. Ah! You know? I mean, no one had written a piece of music like this before. Maybe nobody else did afterwards. Mahler tried. You know, but he was a complicated guy. And when you get to you see, there are times when the idea is not to make the nicest sound possible. Sometimes life gets violent and ugly. Sometimes there's blood spurting out, you know? Sometimes that happens. And some of us would prefer to look away. And in this particular case, you can't look away because you're in a concert hall and it's not what you're seeing, it's what you're hearing. And what you just heard, you will never forget, ever. And therefore, when you get to hear, you do not want to use a lot of pedal. When Mozart's mother died, he didn't write, "Oh, I don't feel so good." And suddenly, the two of you come in. And you know, sometimes when people when people undergo some horrible accident, they survive the accident, but then there's the shock, and the shock kills them. And what kills me, what slays me, is the dolce when you come in and go, da-dee-dee. It's too much, you know. This hideous, frightening violence this terror, this paroxysm, and suddenly you just go, and then the cello gets to play the constellation. But by that time, everybody in the audience is half dead. You know? So we have about 2 more minutes. Mess up our lives, would you? 114? Good, and on a self-defense, your pitches are always going to be too soft. Okay. Especially when you have the double stop pitches with the F and the E. We need a little bit more of those. And, you know, I'll stop by saying that, you see, at the end, Tom, the business of this naked C. It's the very bareness of that sound that seems to me so devastating. And doing this, besides being contradictory, takes away a sobriety that might just be intended. We don't know for sure. And the end needs simply to whisper. You know, it's triple piano. It's about as many pianos as any composer had written. Beethoven, I think, does it once that I know of. And I know that in the 7th Symphony there's a triple forte. But with Schubert, there's a lot of it, you know, a lot of it. All right, folks, as somebody would say, that's our show for tonight. So, thank you.